G'day and welcome back to my channel. This time I've got something really interesting to show you. Yes, it's an Airfix motorcycle, and this is a really old kit. This kit's about 40-50 years old. It is ancient, but it is an absolutely lovely kit, and it took me about 2 years to do it on and off. I mean, it wasn't really that hard to build, but I had to learn some techniques. Anyhow, after 2 years I've ended up with this. What do you think of that? Shiny, isn't it? Look at those pipes. So, would you like to see how I put it together? You would? Great! Okay, roll the music. Now, this kit was first produced in 1969 by Airfix, and then it was reboxed a couple of times, and this is the second reboxing. So mine's the 1975 version. But essentially, it's a 50-year-old kit. That's when it was first produced. And my moulding is 45 years old. Now, the moulding was surprisingly very crisp and clear. Here's a photo. And despite its age, whoever sculpted this model did a beautiful job. And admittedly, these bikes were still around, and they could probably get hold of one and measure it all and get it absolutely spot on. So the accuracy is quite apparent because of that. It was of the time. So it's terrific. I mean, anybody that has one of these bikes that's seen my model has remarked at how close it is. It looks just so much like the bike that they remembered, and they remember them quite fondly. Like anybody with something like this, an emotive object, you have quite a strong memory and quite a big attachment. So anyhow, that's good. It's nice looking, well moulded. Now let's have a look in the box. Well, it's not going to be much now because I've built the bloody thing. But all those sprues you saw before. The instructions, of course, are all yellowed out over all the years. There's no date and no scale anywhere in this kit. But as I say, checking research, especially looking on ScaleMates, they believe it was first introduced in 1969, and then this particular boxing that I have is 1975, as I said. And there's some conjecture about the scale. I first thought it was 1/9, and it was listed that way in ScaleMates at first when I first started building it. Now they've revised that to 1/16. So obviously somebody has run a measuring tape over the real bike and then compared it to the model and gone, hang on, it's not 1/9, it's 1/16. And it's small, it's tiny, it's not as big as the real one. That's all we know. Anyhow, instructions, you get a nice little blurb there telling you all about the motorcycle. It's all very interesting. And it's good old Airfix instructions from that period, where basically everything is in a big exploded drawing. Some of the ship kits I've got for Airfix, every part, like all the parts, are in one drawing, one exploded drawing, and you have to build it from that. But one good thing is they describe and tell you what things are. So while you're building, you're actually told what this thing is. This is a horn, and this is, basically an air intake cover, and so on and so on. This is a carburetor, and it's really good. So as you're going through, you actually learn a little bit about the vehicle, and you understand what all the parts are. So it's basically all of that. It didn't come with a hole. What happened here is you don't get any decals. All you had were some of these. Now I probably could have scanned these and printed them out on my computer, and in hindsight that probably would have been a good idea instead of wrecking this, but at the time I cut that out, and that was the rear number plate. Here's a photo. So that was the rear number plate. Not much in the instructions for painting it. Basically all they've said is silver, black, matte black and gloss black, and that's it. So it was pretty sort of obvious. Basically the tyres and the seat, again, the handlebars and what have you, are sort of a matte colour. But the body, all the metal parts, are going to be glossy. The motor, well, what I ended up doing is, instead of making the silver, and it just didn't work, I painted the motor with Styrene metal and then dry brushed on some aluminium paint, which would be closer to the actual thing. I referenced some photos of the actual motorbike. Plenty of them around, restored bikes are absolutely immaculate. So it's easy enough to get references. So I did that. And then with the pipes, well, it took me 2 or 3 goes. And eventually I got a really good chrome look for my pipes. But more of that in a sec. Let's have a look now at the build photos, and I'll talk you through of the steps and the stages and the things that I learned. The reason why it took so long, because I had to really teach myself a lot of new techniques, and I had to find ways, like doing the pinstriping on here. There are lots of things I had to figure out. The only thing I haven't done to this build that I'd like to do is the BMW logo. I'm still yet to find a decal a colour decal that size, or I might have to get some printed for myself and put them on. So I might do that, but by the purpose of this video, well, she won't have that. It's just going to be black and white. Anyhow, without further ado, let's have a look at the build process. Kit started with beautiful plastic. It was so nicely moulded. There was really hardly any cleanup at all, and everything fitted together, maybe except for a bit of a warpage in the frame, which was easy enough to overcome. The parts went together so quickly to get to the basic stage, the wheels and the chassis there and the tank. So then I started to paint things up. Black for most of the frame and the wheels, and then I use Stynylrez metal to do the motor and the pipes, although I did end up dry brushing the motor with aluminium, and I ended up chroming the pipes later. But basically they're the only two colours that I had to play with, so I had to work out all my effects from that. Now here I started building up some of the assemblies, such as the forks, front and rear fork assembly, and the tank. The tank had to be put on in two halves and glued on the model and then painted, which was a bit of a bugger. But I managed to mask around the frame. It was early stages, and I got that together. I wish I'd had the gloss Stynylrez back then, gloss black Stynylrez. That would have been perfect for that tank. But everything was done in matte and later on covered in future. So all the parts that are glossy are just Stynylrez flat covered in future gloss, and the parts that are matte are just Stynylrez black. So at this stage I hadn't worked out how to do pinstripes or anything, but I had built up that front fork frame. That was a little tricky. You had to have wits about you, but if you did it in the order that Airfix told you, everything worked well. And the beauty is Airfix instructions are in the order number of the parts. So you start with part 1 and you go to part 99. That's the order you build things. Anyhow, now I wanted to basically start doing some final assembly here. I pretty well had all the sub-assemblies done and things in their bright colour. So I tried to get the motor into the frame, but I had such a problem trying to get it to match up, and I found for some reason it didn't go square, and I had to twist it and bend it and get it in there to be at the, to sit absolutely straight along the line. Once that was done, it helped the warpage, helped everything else. Now here's where I started to work on chrome effects, and I used the Molotow liquid chrome pen, which is fine for small things, but it was hopeless for those big long pipes. It really didn't work. It was very difficult to get an even coat. So I was back to the drawing board, and I sort of had to think about what I was going to do. So I worked on some clear parts then, and I did the rear light. I worked out how to do the pinstripes on the seat, and I also had to mask up and put the chrome effects for the front lamp. I wish I had done all of that before I actually installed the lamp on the model. Live and learn. At this stage I thought possibly I could decant the chrome paint from the Molotow pen and airbrush it, but I'd actually got to the end of the pen. I thought, well, I'm going to have to buy something, and my friend David got me onto this AK Extreme Metal Chrome, and it needed a gloss undercoat, so I first would have to prepare all the pipes and spray them in Stynylrez gloss black. Now you don't have to use Stynylrez, there's an AK product with a gloss black, but you need a gloss black underneath to then add your chrome effect. Now while I was waiting for everything to dry and for things to sort of get together, I decided I would work on the cables that needed to run out of the handlebar fittings, which go down and operate the brakes and also do the gearbox. And I had some leftover pipes left over from my Aoshima bike, so I used those. I was pretty happy with that. Results quite good. Airfix had locating points for your pipes everywhere, so it was easy to do. Now the manifold and the exhaust pipe, they had chromed up nicely, and my test fit looked pretty good, but it still showed a lot of scratches and a lot of, it just wasn't up to the level I wanted. So I got out my fine, if any, sanding sticks, resanded the pipes, resprayed them in Stynylrez gloss, and then put another layer of chrome on, and much better, much smoother. So now I turned to wiring the motor, and I just worked out my lengths and followed some photos that I had, and it didn't take long until I had that bike all wired up and the first chrome pipes in. So there's my little 1/16 scale BMW R69 from Airfix, and I am very happy with the final result. It might have taken me 2 years, but I had to sort of learn a few things and have a bit of patience, sort of work my way through a few of the problems and go, how do I do that? It wasn't so much the kit's fault because it really fitted together beautifully. There was a tiny bit of warpage on the frame, but that was easy enough to peg and glue together, no big deal. But there were just sort of ways to do things, what to do first, chicken and the egg sort of stuff they had to figure out. And it's the first vehicle that I've ever wired. I mean, I've done scratch stuff and bits and pieces and things with my aircraft and my ship, sure, but never wired a motor, so I was pretty happy that I did that. Wasn't that hard to do, really. Just, again, had to have your wits about you, check the reference diagrams, and make yourself a few pieces of wire that fitted. I drilled holes in the motor to locate those wires. That's why they click in nicely. And they fit exactly the points that I could find from my references. The pinstripes, yeah, well, eventually when I realised, hang on, you've painted it black and the plastic's white, why don't you just very carefully use a blade and scrape off the paint over the ridge of where the pinstripe is, and voila, you've got a white line. So yes, they were scraped on. And unfortunately I put too many layers of paint on the tank. You can see it sometimes in the light. Trying to paint the pinstripes around the tank until I'd figured out that technique, and all I did was basically have the whole thing black and then scrape the paint off very carefully over those raised pinstripes, and they were exposed. So that's a great trick if you want to get that effect, especially if the moulding is there for you and helps you. Just have the undercoat colour and away you go. It's lucky if the plastic was white. So yeah, I'm happy with that. And I did the brake lines, they're all done. Bit of leftover piping from the only other bike I've ever built, which was an Oshima kit that the Beckers gave me for Christmas. In fact, this was a Beckers kit, this one. Yeah, the Becker had this and then decided, oh, maybe he wouldn't build it. He doesn't like Airfix. I snapped it up and loved it. Beautifully fit together, beautifully moulded, a lot of fun, lots of things to learn and do. And in the end, that's it. I got a lot out of this. I got my money's worth out of this because I learnt techniques, I practiced my craft, and in the end, I have this result that I'm very, very happy with. So there you go. That's my BMW R69 from Airfix, and I am as pleased as punch with my result. So we'll end this video a bit of a montage of the bike, some nice snappy photos I've taken, and that's it for now. At least it was a break from ships, wasn't it? Yeah, no, all of you are a little bit sick of all the ships, but don't worry. There'll be lots of other things I'm going to build. All right, it's hooroo from Australia, and it's goodbye from Harry Houdini.